Rain pounds the asphalt. A black car door slams. Inside a dim warehouse, voices explode into a furious argument. A mob boss is screaming, fists smashing the table, men shouting over each other, chaos spiraling out of control. And then someone whispers a name. The room freezes, not because a gun was fired, not because someone threatened violence, because a man just walked in, calm, silent, breathing steady. John Wick. The loudest men suddenly stop talking. The argument dies without a single word from him. That is the terrifying power of emotional control. But that moment, the silence, the fear, the sudden shift of power did not start in that warehouse. It started deep inside the human brain long before anyone raised their voice. Because the real reason people lose control during arguments is biological. When someone feels attacked, disrespected, or humiliated, the brain activates a survival mechanism known as the amygdala response. Psychologist Daniel Goleman describes this in his work on emotional intelligence as an amygdala hijack. In that instant, the emotional brain takes over. Heart rate rises, breathing becomes shallow, adrenaline floods the bloodstream, logic weakens, reaction takes control. That is why arguments escalate so quickly. People stop thinking and start defending. Imagine two people arguing, one shouting, interrupting, pushing harder and harder, the other quiet, listening, speaking slowly. That silence changes the entire psychological dynamic. According to negotiation research discussed by Chris Voss, strategic pauses force the other person to reveal more information. The brain becomes uncomfortable with silence and begins filling the gap with words. The calm listener gains control of the conversation without raising their voice. This is why the presence of John Wick carries such psychological weight. His reputation alone shapes behavior before he even acts. Power, according to the ideas explored in the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, often begins with perception. If people believe someone is dangerous, disciplined, or unstoppable, their behavior changes automatically. The argument weakens before it even begins. But losing control during arguments is something nearly everyone experiences. Neuroscience shows that emotional triggers, insults, disrespect, rejection, activate neural pathways associated with physical danger. The brain cannot easily distinguish between emotional threat and physical threat. Words feel like attacks. The body reacts accordingly. That is why voices rise. That is why people say things they regret seconds later. It is not strategy. It is biology. Now imagine the contrast inside that chaotic room again. One man screaming, desperate to prove his dominance. Another man standing perfectly still. That contrast is exactly what gives Wick his psychological advantage. Emotional control is influence. In the films of John Wick, Wick survives impossible confrontations because his reactions are disciplined. The same principle exists in real-world communication. When someone refuses to react emotionally, the conflict begins to lose its fuel. Negotiation experts describe a powerful technique called mirroring, explained by Chris Voss. Instead of arguing back, a person simply repeats the last few words spoken by the other person. This small psychological trick encourages them to explain themselves further. Instead of escalating the conflict, the conversation becomes calmer. The brain shifts from defensive emotion into analytical thinking. But even someone like John Wick is not emotionless. His story begins with devastating loss, the death of his wife, the destruction of the quiet life he tried to build. Pain, grief, rage, moments when control could have shattered. Yet what defines him is not the absence of emotion, but mastery over it. His discipline turns chaos into strategy. His silence turns tension into authority. And this reveals the deeper truth about arguments. Winning is rarely about proving someone wrong. Communication research shows that people rarely change their position when they feel attacked. They change when they feel understood, listening longer, lowering the emotional intensity, asking calm questions. These actions reduce the brain's defensive reaction and restore rational thinking. That is why the loudest voice rarely wins the argument. The loudest voice is usually the one that lost control first. Real power belongs to the person who controls their emotions, while everyone else loses theirs. The person who stays calm when insults are thrown. The person who refuses to let anger dictate their words. Because in every argument, there is a moment when the emotional storm reaches its peak. A moment when someone explodes and someone else remains still. And in that moment, the balance of power quietly shifts. The shouting stops mattering. The threats stop mattering. The only thing that matters is control. And that is the real psychology behind arguments. The one who masters their emotions masters the conflict. The one who masters the conflict controls the outcome. Just like John Wick,